Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of watery vibes, checking out one final song that sounds like or reminds us of water. This one is titled well for the theme, We Are Water by the artist Papadosio. Let's dive in. See what they're bringing to the table today. A very funky 4/4. Oh, I thought that was a bass synth. Oh, dude. That's a gnarly bass guitar.
Human vibrational energy, thoughts, words, ideas, and music affect the molecular structure of water. Please remember that water comprises over 70% of the mature human body and covers the same amount on our planet. Water is the very source of all life. This photo shows the beautifully formed geometric design.
What I believe is that water can differentiate between a harmonious vibration and a non-harmonious vibration. And as it does that result manifests in the design of the crystal being beautiful or not.
This sound was originally used for the melodic idea in the last section. And now it's this pinging texture. Yeah. I don't think it was this exact drum pattern, but the consistency of the 16th notes was already kind of working its way underneath that last part. Just a really cool transition there. Oh. Dude, the textures on this. The shifting snare accent's real fun too. Oh, a little bit of a jazzy descent. It's just a fun idea. There's almost a human-like quality to the tone as
A group of
well.
people were asked to project onto a flask of water in front of them very positive emotions like love, tenderness, and concern. Then, the flask was replaced with another one, and the people were asked to project emotions of a different type: fear, aggression, hatred. After this, measurements were taken on the samples. The water exhibited changes that were clearly in one
So
direction.
this is back to the first part of the track.
So love increases water's energy levels and stabilizes the water, while aggressive emotions reduce the energy and make radical changes in the water. I hope to show people through my research that water has a memory of its own.
I'm sure that goes into the next track, but it was interesting that through all of that, the journey of the song, we end up on this feeling of enlightenment. It's a very positive, warm ending. A little buzzy, a little sharp because of the tones and themselves, but the notes, the chords, very warm. Very cool finale. Dude, this was a wild song. It's electronic through most of it. I'd actually be really interested in knowing the instrumentation of it all. Because right from the start, I was like, okay, we got a bit of a sounded like electronic drums, sounded like a synthy bass tone. And as we got further through the track, I think I came to understand this to be a live drummer and a live bassist that were the sounds were modulated, made to sound more digital, but not programmed, recorded. I think that's very cool. And it makes me wonder how much of the rest of this is performed rather than programmed. It doesn't really change too much of the end result, but I think it does alter my understanding of the track, not in a thematic way, but conceptually. The way that it all came together to become what it is. Through that lens, though, I think I approach it more from an electronic perspective. Most of that comes through in the ways that the song is built. A lot of this is building blocks. We have this drum beat, we have this bass lick, we have this ornamental idea, we have this textured idea, we have this melody. We just turn them on one at a time. We start off with drum and bass. Later on, we'll add this ostinato, then we'll add this texture, and just kind of flipping the light switches on for each of these until we have a full sound. All of these working off of ostinatos. Everything in here is looped. I think. There might have been a couple of more linear ideas, though it's quite possible they were just working on longer loops too. But most of what I remember of this track is looped ideas. Even the bass lick, as long as some of these can be, they are ultimately a pattern to be repeated. Nothing linear about them. Just a longer loop. And so a lot of this track ends up to me feeling like electronic music, working with loops rather than um, like a part to record across time. Although I suppose when we look at modern recording processes, yeah, you record a bass lick and then you copy paste it a bajillion times. That's certainly a possible way to create music these days. So I guess it's really not too far divorced from electronic music, but I guess I'm thinking more in a traditional format, where in a rock band or a country group, you're going to record a take, whereas with electronic music, you're going to record a loop and then repeat that loop in the software. But I do feel a lot of this leans more towards that electronic side of composition. You have your bass lick, you repeat it. You have your texture, you repeat it. There is also another side of this that feels very electronic, which is textural modulation, in that a sound of an instrument can be modulated across time. Going back to the rock perspective, you can certainly do this with a pedal, with a footboard. You can change your sound over time and modulate it, but to me, that's always been more of a rarity, aside from, like blues rock wah pedals, which are super common. But the idea of modulating over time, to me, is just a very electronic centered technique, even if other genres may use it. And we can hear a ton of this across the board on this track. And there's also the electronic sounds in here too, which, again, based on how I've come to the conclusion that the drums and the bass were real instruments, it's quite possible that these instruments are also real and then modulated through effects and stuff later on. But to me, they sound like electronic sounds. And so I think it's interesting where it blends together, but also blurs the lines between these two. It is kind of a jazz outfit in a lot of ways. Not that they're playing jazz, but it's a jazz rhythm section. We possibly have a keyboardist and a bassist and a drummer. And it's pretty straightforward. There's also a lot of elements in here that are groovy and atmospheric, but it's all translated into an electronic landscape and feels very much like electronic music more so than any other genre, both through composition and texture, even though it is made up of a jazz rhythm section. I find that to be really interesting, blurring the lines between genres. There's only a handful of times that I've heard bands who do this, or maybe it's only been a handful of times that it has been pointed out, because, as I saw at the beginning, it's very easy to just confuse one for the other. But I do find that to be really cool, and I'm always excited to hear music like that, to blur the lines between genres and sounds. The bass is ridiculous. I don't know any other way to put it. The bass tone is massive, and it really wasn't until I heard some very distinct picking timbres within here, finger picked timbres, that it dawned on me that this was a bass guitar and not a synthesizer. But the tone itself feels very digital and is this massive, funky idea that sort of sits at the bottom of this track. It is a persistent foundation for everything else that happens. It lays down the harmonic information. It's also rhythmically engaged with the drums, and it's a melodic lick too. It isn't just playing pedal tone. It is the trifecta instrument, and it is the foundation that everything else is built off of. But it also drives the song too. The bass is so important to this track. It is somehow itself the ground, the glue that holds everything together, but also the thing that is in the forefront of the mix, that a lot of the main ideas kind of dance around to allow the bass to be heard and felt, and allow the bass to control where the track goes. I don't think it is a mistake that a good portion of the opening of this track, the bass is really the only lead pitched instrument. It's just the bass and the drums and some texture in the background. The bass is presented as the leader from the start, and even as we get more instruments, the bass is still the one to listen to. No matter how dense this track gets, it's the bass that leads the way. I'm a huge fan of bass. Y'all know that by now. And hearing such a strong bass idea presented in such a strong tone is right up my alley. I loved it. And every time the bassists swap things around to introduce a new lick, a new ostinato, drop in a new idea, new rhythmic device, dude, it always worked, man. every single part in here. And between the bass and the drums, we get all these super groovy ideas. The drums are interestingly complex in a simple way. There's quite a bit of syncopation in the drum part. There's also variable accent points. There's a section in here where we're accenting 2 and 4, which is a pretty standard driven pattern for accents. You got the ka, ka, ka. 2 and 4 usually drive songs forward. But the thing is that it's not always 2 and 4. Not consistently, anyways. We get a 2 and a 4, and then a 2, and then the and of 3, and then an and of 1, and then the 4, and it just dances around. Those syncopations is what allows the song to be as groovy while still carrying this momentum towards the end of the track. This type of rhythmic playfulness is present all throughout the drum parts here, and it's not even just the snare. Sometimes it's the bass idea that dances around that snare that's a bit more static. Sometimes it's neat little rhythms between little lighter hits, maybe even ghost notes on a cymbal, and heavier accented notes to create something very dexterous and bouncy. Every part of the drum kit is designed to push the track forward while being incredibly infectious to the point that there's almost zero downtime in this track for moving your body. Almost every part of this demands you to bob your head, move your hips, bounce your knees, whatever. Bouncing knees sounds weird, but like this movement, it's bouncing and it's mostly driven by the knees. I didn't know other way to describe that. Um, it is just very danceable. And a lot of that comes from the variety in the drums mixed with the playfulness of the bass. And of course, it's just done in such a simple way. There is complexity to it, but it's digestible complexity. The drummer never gets too intense with polymeter or super groovy, or I guess ungroovy rhythmic devices that are maybe intellectually interesting, but can you move to them? Like they never really push into that realm. It is not an easy drum part, but it is digestible. And walking that line, I think, is really important for a track like this. I think what stands out to me also is that when I think of the types of atmospheres and sound profiles that this song engages with, again, more on the electronic side of things, I just don't expect complex drumming. A lot of electronic music we've listened to, aside from the wild groups out there like Aphex Twin and what's another more experimental group I can think of. It's two people, Autechre. There we go. So aside from the obvious progressive experimental stuff out there, a lot of the electronic music stuff that we've listened to in the past has been, even if it's interesting harmonically and melodically, a bit more focused on the rhythmic side of things. Part of that may come down to programmed drumming. I don't think that's necessarily something that has to come from that, but it might be easier just to lock into something a bit more static there. Whereas in this case, where I'm pretty sure we have a real drummer, they can inject as much personality as they want into it on the fly. So the two of these instruments really hold everything down. It's the rest of the instruments that make it so interesting to listen to. It's the chirping sound, it's the buzzing sound, it's the water drops that were around the 3-minute mark, little short staccato tones, boop, 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 these little like water droplets hitting water. It's all of this. It creates a sound that is, well, I don't know how much of this is influenced by the fact that the spoken word, the sampled sections, feel scientific or even philosophical at times. I didn't catch everything that they were said, but it was the delivery of the people who gave these lines. But there's something mentally expansive about most of this track. It either feels empty to where there's infinite possibility, or it feels so densely static, like electricity. It's brain synapses firing off. All of it played to the backdrop of reverberance and water drops and general feelings of water throughout. I don't know how much of this water theme I'm attributing because my mind is already on the concept of water. Well, because it's the water theme, but also because it's called We Are Water. I don't think generally there's any instruments in here that feel watery to me. The reverb is never overly done. We don't have too many muffled sections that feel like beneath water. We don't have too many instruments that are bright while also light, something like viola or glockenspiel. We don't really have anything like that in here. Almost everything has an electronic buzziness to it, which is sort of the opposite of water. Electronics and water just don't mix. And so to me, watery vibes are usually going to be acoustic adjacent, maybe even electric, but very rarely electronic. So I think it's interesting that somehow they still evoked that at times within this track in a variety of ways, never just one. I feel like with Tool earlier this week, they had the sound of being submerged in water, a general feeling of depth and darkness and muffledness at times. This was a variety of watery ideas. But again, it contrasts pretty heavily with the timbres of these instruments, which don't feel watery at all. I've been trying to piece all of this together. Is it because the depth of water, oceans, the infinite amount of knowledge that we don't have? Water is quite an unexplored area for humanity in the grand scheme of things. And I think that pairs well with the depth of knowledge that we still have to learn philosophically and even scientifically. But that's really my only guess here. I don't think I have anything else that would tie this track to this week's theme. But I still enjoyed the atmospheres here. Again, the expansiveness, the emptiness in some places. It's such a stark control of atmosphere that you just don't often get outside of electronic music, given that every single aspect of the song is kind of encouraged to be played around with. Whereas, yes, if you have a rock band or a metal band, you can record them and your engineer can basically do the exact same thing an electronic composer could do. It's just not as strong of a component of the genre. And we are seeing a bit of a merge there where specifically metalcore and alternative metal are playing around with production in a way that's closer to electronic music these days. But more traditional metal still wouldn't really go in that direction. Whereas electronic music, it is pretty much the part of the genre to tweak and manipulate as many factors as you can to create stuff that's quite unique as far as timbre goes, but even atmosphere. I think this song does a really great job of doing that, once again, while still using acoustic and electric instrumentation. Yeah, it's a very cool track from start to finish. It does end up feeling very, I don't know if club is the right word because it feels a little bit more progressive than most club music, but it is still very dancey and it's very easy to just kind of get lost in the surface level element of it and have a good time and not really engage with some of the deeper elements that it is working with. I'm going to look up some of the spoken word stuff here, see if I can find anything on that. And then we're going to wrap this one up. All right. This is made up of 4 quotes. The first 2 are not attributed to anyone, though through a little bit of a web search, I'm kind of confident I can attribute them to the same person who gave us quote 4 on this track, the Japanese scientist Marasu Emoto. Quote 3 is given to us by Konstantin Korotkov. All of them are about the ways that water is or can that water is alive, that it can differentiate between positivity and negativity. That, well, let me just read some of these quotes. It's kind of difficult to sum them up. The first quote says, human vibrational energy, thoughts, words, ideas, and music all affect the molecular structure of water. And remember that water comprises over 70% of the mature human body and covers the same amount of our planet. Water is the very source of all life. The second quote says, I believe water can differentiate between harmonious vibration and non-harmonious vibration. And as it does that, the result manifests in the design of the crystal being beautiful or not. So there is an understanding that water can understand its surroundings and be affected by them. Maybe understand is the wrong word there, but it can be affected by its surroundings. Quote 3 describes a scientific experiment where people were asked to project positive emotions into one flask of water and then negative emotions into another. After both of these were done, measurements were taken on the samples of water, and one clearly exhibited change in one direction while the other changed. So the one where positive energy went in showed higher energy levels in the water and stabilized the water, while aggressive emotions reduced the energy and made radical changes in the water. I find this to be quite intriguing. One, because I'm really curious about what this entailed. What does it mean to project emotions? Are we just shouting? Are we talking? Or are we thinking? Is there a physical thing going on? So anyways, I guess all that's to say, I'm a little skeptical about the scientific experiment to begin with, but all I have is a short quote here rather than all of the details. It even just says that measurements were taken. That's kind of vague. I'd like to know what these measurements were and how we dictated energy levels rising and falling. So yeah, I'm a little skeptical about it, but I understand that I can't really base too much of an opinion on such a short quote about the experiment itself. The final quote says, I hope to show people through my research that water has a memory of its own. So I find all of this to be intriguing, though. The idea that, if true, water is quite reactive to its surroundings. And while maybe not as directly correlated, I think even just having the metaphorical components of, well, if water is reactive to its environment, we're mostly made of water. What if we're like that? Maybe not a direct causation, but a parallel, if nothing else, figuratively, metaphorically. Treat ourselves like water. Put ourselves in positive environments. Don't allow ourselves to be overly stressed. Don't allow ourselves to be overly angry. Don't put us in dramatic situations all the time. Find happiness to revel within. I think even if the science behind it is not not great science, I think just the general idea here to be kind to yourself and to allow yourself to flourish in positive environments is more than a good enough message that even if the science is not great, the message is well worth this odd parallel being drawn here. And I really get behind that message. If that's what the message is at all, death of the author, at least that's what I get out of it. And maybe that's what the track was trying to say too. There's a general evolution in this song from the simplicity at the start to the complexity towards the end that ends in winding back where we were. Maybe, since this is the line about memory, that's what this is. I remembered we started on these ideas, we came back to them. Memory is a part of that, but if the song is representing the changes in water, the song remembers where it's been and returns back to it in a rather natural way, too. But it also ends in a final moment of enlightenment, awe, maybe even. It's a feeling of ascension, if nothing else. And I think that if you follow along with this song's message and you escape negative environments and find yourself a good place to put roots down and grow positively, you'll find that your new life is quite enlightening compared to your old life. So I think in a roundabout way, I really enjoy these groups of quotes, even if the quotes themselves can't exactly get behind yet. I'm probably going to go look up Masaru's entire experiment and see what's going on there. I am quite intrigued by it now. I've never heard of this stuff before. But like I said, right at this moment, I'm kind of skeptical about the literal components of it, but the figurative ones are compelling. At least those are my thoughts. Anyways, what did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on about the music or the science stuff? I'm down to hear anything about either of them. You can put whatever else you like into the comments below as well. Just kind of want to add to the conversation in whatever way you'd like. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That's going to wrap it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to check out a full album. This one going to be a Genesis album, another one, because we have done Lamb Lies Down on Broadway before. What's interesting is I've already checked out a majority of the tracks for single song reactions or during a live stream. So in a small kind of way, it'll be a second time listen to this album, but I've never heard it all collectively before. I'm looking forward to it. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.